From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect couple. Anthony and I had been together since college. Young love that grew into something solid, something real. We'd been through so much together. Job stress, a long-distance phase, even losing people we loved. But through it all, we held on to each other. So when we finally set a date, it felt like more than just a wedding. It was a celebration of everything we'd survived. And deep down, I wanted that day to be everything I'd ever dreamed of. But life doesn't slow down just because you're planning a wedding. Between Anthony's corporate deadlines and my long shifts at the hospital, I work with kids fighting cancer. Our calendars were a mess. I couldn't imagine picking linens or tasting cakes in between patient charts. That's when I heard about Celeste. People talked about her like she was some kind of wedding fairy godmother. Elegant, efficient, and absolutely brilliant. I still remember thinking, maybe she's exactly what we need. We met at this cozy little cafe downtown. Celeste swept in like she owned the air around her, smelled like fresh peonies, and wore heels that didn't make a sound. She opened her sleek portfolio and started talking about venues, color palettes, and a string quartet that brought brides to tears. She promised me the world, my dream day, without the chaos, and I believed her. Of course I did. The first big step? Touring a venue she thought we'd love, next week. That whole week, I felt like a kid again. I'd catch myself daydreaming during my lunch breaks, imagining the aisle, the music, my mom crying softly in the front row. Anthony would laugh when I showed him centerpiece ideas or asked what color the napkins should be. "Whatever you want," he always said, and maybe that's what I loved most about him. He didn't just love me, he trusted my vision, my weird little obsessions, all of it. We were a team, always had been. Celeste kept sending updates, photos of floral arches, table layouts, even a mock-up of the invitation suite. She made it look effortless, like everything was falling perfectly into place. I started to relax. For the first time since we got engaged, I let myself enjoy the process. I wasn't just checking boxes. I was building something beautiful. And I had a feeling this venue she found was going to seal the deal. She described it like a dream, a garden overlooking the lake, draped in soft lights and blooming in color. Anthony and I were supposed to go see it together. We blocked off the afternoon, cleared our schedules, and made plans for lunch after. I laid out my outfit the night before, excited like a schoolgirl before picture day. That morning, I even woke up early, humming while I made coffee. But just as I reached for my mug, something inside me turned. A wave of nausea. Then the fever hit, and within an hour, I was curled up in bed, shaking and sick, with the venue visit just hours away. I hated the thought of missing it. This was the place where I'd say I do, where our lives would officially begin a new chapter, and I wasn't going to be there to choose it. Still, I could barely stand without feeling dizzy. I looked at Anthony, already dressed and ready to go, and said the only thing I could. "You know what I love? Just go. Tell me everything when you get back." He kissed my forehead and promised he would, and I meant it when I said I trusted him. As soon as he walked out the door, though, that little voice started whispering. "You know the one that shows up when you're most vulnerable." I tried to quiet it, told myself I was being dramatic. But lying there in bed, tangled in blankets and guilt, I felt a twist in my gut that had nothing to do with being sick. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence, and suddenly, it was louder than I could take. I sat up, forcing my body to cooperate. Fever or not, I needed to be there. I threw on jeans, wrapped a scarf around my messy hair, and ordered an Uber with shaky fingers. I didn't even tell Anthony I was coming. I just wanted to stand beside him, to see the look on his face when we imagined our future together on that lawn. I thought I was doing something romantic, something brave. But what I walked in on was something else entirely. The Uber dropped me off at the edge of the property, a sprawling estate surrounded by blooming gardens and soft gravel paths. My shoes crunched lightly as I walked, the sun warm on my skin. I remember thinking, this place is even more beautiful than she described. I imagined Anthony standing somewhere, pointing things out to Celeste, maybe taking notes for me. I even smiled to myself. In that moment, I still believed I was walking toward something magical, something ours. I rounded the hedge near the main path, half expecting to hear his laugh or see him waving me over. But what I saw instead stole the air right out of my lungs. They didn't see me. Not at first. Celeste's hand was on his chest, and Anthony, my Anthony, was leaning in, his lips on hers, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The garden, the sunshine, the flowers, it all blurred. My legs locked beneath me. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was splitting open in real time. I backed away slowly, like if I moved too fast, the whole dream would shatter louder than I could bear. I turned a corner and doubled over, bile rising in my throat. I threw up in the grass, but it wasn't from the fever anymore. It was the betrayal, the kind that burns, that makes you question every word, every moment, every touch. I wiped my mouth with a trembling hand and stood up, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I could have screamed, I could have marched over and ended it right then, but I didn't. I don't know what held me back, shock, pride, or maybe just pure survival instinct. I wasn't ready to be seen, not by them, not like that. I walked back to the front, called another Uber, and sat in silence while the car pulled away from the estate. The driver made small talk, but I couldn't answer. I just stared out the window, arms wrapped tightly around myself like they were the only thing holding me together. I replayed it in my head 100 times before we got back home. I lay on the couch for hours, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb for that. I kept asking myself if I had missed something, some sign, some shift. But that's the cruel part about betrayal, isn't it? It doesn't tap you on the shoulder. It wraps its arms around you like love, until suddenly it twists the knife. My mind raced, but beneath the chaos, something strange settled in. Not weakness, not despair. Something colder, sharper. I decided I wasn't going to fall apart. Not for them. If they wanted to be sneaky, fine. Let them think they got away with it. I'd play the role, the sweet bride, the grateful client, the woman who never saw it coming. But I was already planning. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to wait for the right moment, the perfect stage. And I would give them the one thing they never expected, a performance they would never forget. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't even recognize myself. My eyes were swollen, sure, but behind them, something had shifted. I wasn't the woman who believed in fairy tales anymore. I was someone else now, someone who knew exactly what she needed to do. I didn't cancel the wedding. I didn't even mention what I'd seen. When Anthony came home that evening, he kissed my forehead, just like always, and I smiled, just like always. But that smile, it wasn't real. It was the mask I chose to wear while I gathered the pieces. I started checking his emails when he left his laptop open, quietly recording conversations with Celeste under the guise of clarifying details. I saved texts, took screenshots, even photographed receipts. Every little thing became a breadcrumb. And the more I found, the more I felt something inside me harden. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. No, I was going to walk right through it, with my head high. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It hurts, yes, but it also teaches you. It sharpens your edges. And somewhere between heartbreak and strategy, I realized something powerful. I had the perfect opportunity. A wedding, an audience, a moment built for vows and truth. They were planning the most beautiful day of my life. And they didn't even realize, so was I. They thought I didn't know. That was the part that fueled me. Watching them smile across the table, pretending to be nothing more than planner and groom. Watching Celeste take notes while Anthony nodded along, all while thinking I was the clueless bride sipping her latte and dreaming about cake flavors. I played my part to perfection. I even complimented her work, told her I was so grateful, so excited. And God, the way she smiled at me, it was almost impressive. Almost. But inside, I was calculating. Every word they spoke, every look they shared, it was all data, all evidence. While they thought they were running the show, I was building my own script behind the curtain. I began saving everything. Emails where they slipped into late-night timing, a photo of his hand on her lower back at a tasting, even the way her voice dropped when she said his name. I knew I only had one shot, one moment to make it count. So I made it my mission to collect truth like confetti, tiny, glittering pieces that would fall all at once. I started wearing my engagement ring like a weapon. Let it catch the light when I smiled. Let it remind them I was still the one walking down that aisle. I wasn't a victim in this story. I was the narrator, the architect of what was coming. And with every secret I uncovered, I began to stitch together something stronger than a wedding day. I was stitching together a reckoning, one they would never see coming. I kept the wedding plans moving forward like nothing was wrong. Bridal fittings, seating charts, cake tastings, I showed up to all of it. Smiling, engaged, present, and every time Celeste leaned in to whisper a suggestion, every time Anthony brushed my hand like he was still mine, I held it together. I played the role so well I started to scare myself. But when you've been burned, you learn to stop flinching, you learn to use the fire. At night, I would sit at the kitchen table in silence, organizing files on a private flash drive. I gave each one a label: back garden kiss, audio menu planning, text thread 3 a.m. I felt like a detective in my own life, and maybe that sounds cold. But the truth is, it gave me back control. For once, I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing how the story would end, choosing not to let them write my heartbreak for me. And somewhere in the middle of all that planning and pretending, I stopped asking why. I didn't need to know what led them there, or how long it had been going on. I knew enough to take back my power. Enough to make sure that when the lights dimmed and the music swelled, I would be ready, not with a bouquet, but with the truth. Not to seal a promise, but to break an illusion. The days leading up to the wedding were almost cinematic. My mother beamed as she pinned a family heirloom to my bouquet. Friends sent videos toasting our love. Even Anthony seemed more affectionate. Maybe guilt has a way of showing up as tenderness. I let it all wash over me. I let everyone believe we were stepping into forever. But underneath the lace and champagne, I was holding something no one could see. Clarity. There was power in knowing the truth. A strange kind of peace. Not the soft, forgiving kind. No, this was sharper. It steadied my hands when I signed final contracts. It let me smile through our rehearsal dinner. And when Celeste hugged me with her staged affection, I squeezed her back. Not too hard. Just enough to remind myself that this game was almost over, and she had no idea I was the one dealing the final card. I didn't want revenge. Not really. What I wanted was justice. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that walks in calmly and tells the truth out loud. And as I zipped up my wedding dress the night before, alone in the soft light of my bedroom, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, you say your vows, just not the ones they're expecting." The morning of the wedding, the world felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful, no, more like the kind of silence before a storm. My makeup artist told me I looked radiant, that I had the glow brides get when they're in love. I almost laughed. Love? No. What I had was purpose. I let her pin my hair just right, brush shimmer on my cheeks, zip up the dress that used to mean everything. But today, it was just armor. The venue was breathtaking, just like Celeste promised. Lanterns swayed gently in the trees, the scent of roses hung in the air, and string instruments played something delicate and hopeful. Guests arrived in soft pastels and wide smiles. I stood hidden behind a curtain near the aisle, watching them settle into their seats, completely unaware of what was coming. Anthony was already there, charming as ever, shaking hands, hugging family. My mother waved at him proudly. He had no idea. Celeste floated around like a queen, headset in one ear, clipboard in hand, barking gentle orders with that polished smile. She looked so at ease, so pleased with herself, and maybe that's what made it so perfect. All their lies were about to bloom right there in the middle of her perfectly designed paradise. Every ribbon, every flower, every single detail she had obsessed over, it was all about to decorate her downfall. I walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately, holding my breath as the guests rose to their feet. The music swelled like it was carrying some sacred promise, and all eyes were on me, the blushing bride. But I wasn't walking toward a future. I was walking into a performance. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt ready. Like everything in my life had led me here, to this moment. And not a single soul in that garden knew what was coming. Anthony smiled at me like I was still his. Like he hadn't destroyed the foundation we built. And behind him, just off to the side, stood Celeste. She looked proud, confident in the spectacle she'd created. The irony almost made me laugh. She had planned this day down to the second, but what she didn't plan was me. The officiant cleared his throat, welcomed the guests, and started the formalities. I nodded when prompted, went through the motions like a good bride, and then, right before the vows, my voice broke through the script. "Before I say I do," I said, my hands steady, my voice strong, "I want to take a moment to thank the woman who made this day unforgettable." People smiled, some clapped, assuming I meant the planner. I looked right at Celeste, not because of the flowers or the decor, but because she showed me exactly who I was about to marry. That's when I pulled the small remote from my bouquet and clicked. The screen lit up behind us. At first, people looked confused. Then the video began to play. Grainy, shaky, but clear enough. Celeste and Anthony, the garden, the kiss. A few people gasped out loud. Others turned to each other in disbelief. Then came the audio, soft, secret, and undeniable. Their voices, their plans, their laughter in moments I was never supposed to hear. I watched the room fall apart around me. My mother's hands went to her mouth. A child somewhere started crying. Anthony turned white, like the blood just drained from him in real time. Celeste didn't even move, just blinked, frozen, caught mid-breath like she couldn't decide if it was better to run or pretend it wasn't real. But it was real, and they weren't in control anymore. I looked straight at Anthony, my voice clear. "You planned this day with her," I said, "but I planned this moment. For you." And then I handed the remote to the officiant and stepped back. No tears, no screaming, just silence. Because sometimes silence is louder than rage. And in that silence, something inside me cracked wide open, not from pain, but from release. Let them carry the weight now. Let them explain, deny, beg. Me? I had one more thing to do, one more step to take. I didn't run. I didn't throw my bouquet or collapse in a dramatic heap like you see in the movies. I just turned, lifted my dress slightly so I wouldn't trip, and walked out, step by step. Past the stunned guests, past the photographers who didn't know whether to shoot or lower their cameras, past the woman who tried to ruin my life, and the man who let her. Each step felt lighter than the last, like I was walking out of a cage I didn't know I'd been locked in. Outside, the wind caught my veil and pulled it loose. I let it go. Just watched it fly down the hill, delicate and wild. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I took a deep breath that didn't taste like pretending. I didn't need a getaway car. I didn't need anyone chasing after me. I needed space. I needed to be alone with my thoughts, not their excuses. So I started walking. No plan. No phone. Just walking. Back at the venue, the chaos must have erupted by then. Questions, accusations, embarrassment, whispers spreading like fire. But that wasn't my problem anymore. They could deal with the fallout. They could pick through the pieces. I had already lived the hardest part. Now I was just free. And freedom, I realized, doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a wedding dress, walking away without looking back. The next few days passed in a haze, part grief, part quiet satisfaction. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends, distant relatives, even complete strangers who had heard what happened. Some were angry on my behalf. Others were stunned. A few said things like, "I wish I had done what you did." And that's when it hit me. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a mirror for people who had stayed silent, for people still pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Celeste's name began trending online, first in whispers, then in headlines. Clients backed out, brands pulled partnerships. A journalist reached out asking for a comment on the most shocking wedding scandal of the year. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was already louder than anything I could have said. Her empire was collapsing, not because I wanted revenge, but because she built it on secrets. And secrets don't stay buried forever. Anthony tried to call. Of course he did. Once. Then twice. Then from a blocked number. I never answered. What could he possibly say? That he was sorry? That it didn't mean anything? No apology would unkiss her lips. No excuse would rewind the moment I saw them. And honestly, I didn't want closure from him. I had already closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just walked out and locked it behind me. A week later, I found myself sitting alone at a little cafe by the ocean, barefoot in the sand, sunglasses on, dress long gone. The salt air felt like medicine. I had my phone in one hand and a coffee in the other. Peace tasted nothing like champagne, but it was so much sweeter. I scrolled without urgency, just passing the time, until a headline caught my eye. Top wedding planner Celeste Monroe closes her company following viral scandal. I stared at it for a long second, then smiled, not with bitterness, not with smugness, but with clarity. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it's just truth spoken out loud at the exact right moment. I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and listened to the waves. There was no wedding band on my finger, no groom at my side, but I felt whole. More whole than I'd felt in a very long time. I whispered something to myself as I took another sip of coffee. Just a few simple words, half laugh, half exhale. Justice tastes better than cake. And just like that, the chapter closed. Not on the fairy tale I once imagined, but on something far better, the truth, and my freedom.